There exists, deep within the collective unconscious, a type of individual who walks a path unlike any other. They are not better nor more important, but they are rare. Their thoughts often echo in solitude, their emotions stretch beyond what words can express, and their vision of the world is often misread, even misunderstood. If you have experienced the following signs, you are not broken. You are not strange. You are part of the few who possess an extraordinary and uncommon psychological makeup, a rare personality. You've sat among friends and family, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and conversation, and yet somewhere inside, there's an inexplicable emptiness that stirs. This sensation isn't born from the absence of people. It's a quiet realization that your inner world operates on a frequency different from those around you. You can smile, contribute to the discussion, even enjoy the moment to some extent, and still feel like a distant observer of your own life. This isn't a flaw in your social abilities, nor is it a sign of emotional detachment. It is the result of a consciousness that processes reality on a deeper, often more symbolic level. You find yourself attuned to subtleties, an undercurrent in someone's tone, a flicker in their expression, a silence that carries more meaning than words ever could. You notice what others miss, and because of that, you often feel what others don't. When you speak of these things, you're met with puzzled expressions, polite nods, or quick subject changes, not because others don't care, but because they genuinely do not see the world through the same intricate lens that you do. This disconnect creates a subtle but persistent feeling of separation, a kind of existential solitude that remains even in close company. You may wonder if something is wrong with you, if perhaps you're too sensitive, too introspective, or too intense, but none of these are true. What you're experiencing is the natural result of possessing an inner landscape that is richer, more complex, and more intuitively wired than the norm. While others may be content with external stimulation, you seek resonance, alignment, depth. A casual chat leaves you unfulfilled unless it carries some emotional truth or intellectual curiosity. You long for conversations that dive into purpose, transformation, paradoxes of the psyche, not just the daily weather or latest trends. In the eyes of others, this might make you seem withdrawn, aloof, or overly serious. But what they don't realize is that your silence is often filled with observation and reflection, that your distance is more about preservation than disinterest. You've likely developed the ability to blend in when needed, to mimic social cues and participate just enough to avoid unwanted attention. But that act can leave you feeling even more isolated. Because pretending to belong doesn't satisfy the deeper need to be seen for who you truly are, beneath the persona, beneath the mask. And yet, despite the discomfort this rare trait brings, it is also a source of great strength. In your solitude, you forge a relationship with yourself that others rarely do. You listen to your inner voice not out of narcissism, but because it's where the truth lives for you. You create meaning from moments others dismiss, and you experience life not as a series of events, but as an unfolding psychological journey. This feeling of being alone in a crowd isn't a condemnation. It is a marker of depth, of authenticity, of a consciousness that belongs more to the symbolic world than to the superficial one. And in that quiet detachment lies a kind of beauty, a kind of clarity that only the rarest among us come to. No, you've always had an eye for connections that others overlook, as if your mind is wired to notice threads beneath the surface, weaving patterns out of what most would dismiss as mere coincidence or noise. While others move through life reacting to what is obvious, you pause, observe, and discern underlying meaning. You notice the way someone's smile doesn't match their eyes, how a conversation shifts energy the moment a certain word is spoken, how events unfold not randomly, but almost symbolically, as if the universe is communicating in a language only a few are capable of hearing. This pattern recognition isn't merely analytical or logical. It is intuitive, often emotional, and deeply rooted in the unconscious mind. You might not always be able to articulate it, but you feel it in your bones when something aligns or falls out of place. Others might call it overthinking or say you're reading too much into things, but you know that what they dismiss is exactly what gives you clarity. You see dynamics playing out in relationships long before the consequences arrive. You detect when a person's words and intentions diverge. You feel the rhythm of life cycles, the rise and fall of emotional tides, the repetition of archetypal roles people unconsciously step into. When someone is about to leave, betray, grow distant, or change, you sense it like an inner whisper, not from a place of paranoia, but from a deep psychological perception that defies conventional logic. You may have learned over time to silence these impressions to avoid standing out or being labeled as overly dramatic or suspicious, but your inner system continues to function regardless. It scans, it feels, it understands, often in ways that leave you without external validation. You might sense when a person's smile is a mask or when a situation is not what it pretends to be, even if everyone around you sees nothing wrong. This can create a quiet burden, a loneliness not rooted in isolation, but in knowing things others don't. It's not that you're trying to be special. It's simply that your mind and emotions are attuned to undercurrents most never detect. And this awareness, though powerful, can sometimes feel like a curse. You may wish you could unsee, that you could walk through life without constantly analyzing the depth of every interaction or anticipating the trajectory of emotional dynamics. But at the same time, you know that this perceptiveness is one of your greatest strengths. It allows you to navigate life with insight, to protect yourself and others, to understand motivations and behaviors without them being spelled out. You become a quiet keeper of truths others ignore, a silent observer of the symbolic dance behind appearances. It is through this lens that you interact with the world, not just by what is said or done, but by what is felt, suggested, hidden, or repeated. The world becomes a language of patterns, a dream, like sequence of signs and synchronicities, and though it often separates you from the casual ease of those who live only on the surface, it also grants you a deeper wisdom that cannot be taught, only discovered through experience and sensitivity. To the invisible threads that bind all things together, there are moments when the weight of the world seems to rest entirely on your chest. Moments when someone else's pain feels indistinguishable from your own, not because you want to suffer, but because you cannot help but feel everything so deeply. You don't just observe emotions, you absorb them, carry them, reflect them, often more intensely than the people expressing them. You walk into a room and instantly sense the mood, the tension behind the smiles, the grief behind the silence, the unspoken conflicts that hang in the air like static. It doesn't require words or explanations. Your nervous system responds before your mind even fully understands why. Others might brush off these impressions or call them sensitivity, but for you, it's more than that. It's an involuntary immersion in the emotional landscapes of others. This trait often began in childhood, where you might have learned to read a parent's shifting mood before they said a single word, adapting yourself constantly to the energy around you as a form of emotional survival. Over time, you became a translator of feelings, a quiet witness to the inner states others failed to acknowledge in themselves. You became the one people turn to when they don't know how to express what they feel, because somehow you already understand. Yet the same gift that makes you a source of comfort can become an internal storm. You carry wounds that are not your own, sadness that you cannot trace back to your life, anger that burns through you despite having no clear origin. At times you feel overtaken by emotions so vast they seem to belong to something larger than you, something ancestral, collective, even cosmic. This emotional resonance, while profound, can isolate you. People often misunderstand the depth of what you feel, assuming you're overreacting or being dramatic, not realizing that what feels like a ripple to them can feel like a tidal wave to you. You may struggle to explain your inner experiences because language often fails to capture the magnitude of your emotional truth. You try to rationalize it, contain it, manage it, but the feelings remain, insisting on being felt, on being processed, on being honored. You may retreat into solitude not because you dislike others, but because your system becomes overwhelmed by too much emotional input. You require space not just for rest, but for integration, for recalibrating your sense of self after carrying so much of what isn't yours. Despite the exhaustion, you wouldn't trade this sensitivity, because within it lies your compassion, your insight, your capacity to love beyond reason. You understand pain not as a concept, but as a reality etched into the fabric of human experience, and because of this, you bring healing simply through presence. Your empathy is not a passive experience. It is a powerful, active force that reshapes how you relate to the world, and though it demands more of you than most will ever realize, it also allows you to connect on a level that transcends surface interaction and touches something timeless in everyone you meet. From a very young age, you found yourself asking questions that made others uncomfortable, questions that cut beneath the surface of things and demanded a truth that wasn't always easy to offer. You didn't accept explanations simply because they were offered by authority, tradition, or popular opinion. You wanted to understand the roots, the layers, the unspoken assumptions that gave shape to every belief. While others were content with the what, you were always chasing the why, and when you reached that, you pushed further, asking why again. This relentless questioning wasn't defiance. It was your natural orientation toward meaning, your mind's instinct to pierce illusions and grasp what lies beneath. Even as you tried to fit into systems of education, religion, family, or culture, there was always a quiet part of you standing just outside, watching, wondering, testing the walls to see if they were real or imagined. This habit of questioning was never about rebellion for its own sake. It was about aligning yourself with what felt deeply true, even when that truth made things harder. You could never fully follow rules that felt hollow, nor could you pretend to believe something that didn't resonate with your deeper sense of reality. This inner compass, while invaluable, often put you at odds with others, not because you wanted conflict, but because your questions exposed the fragility of what many people prefer not to examine. You weren't trying to attack their beliefs, you simply couldn't silence the need to understand life on your own terms. As time passed, this trait shaped your relationships, your world, you and your inner life in profound ways. You began to see that many people cling to certainty as a form of safety, constructing narratives to give structure to the chaos of existence, and your questions, however sincere, often threatened that safety. You learned to choose your words more carefully, to listen even when you saw contradictions, to offer your perspective only when it was invited, and yet the inner questioning never stopped. It followed you into moments of joy, sorrow, faith, doubt, love, and solitude. It became the way your soul breathed. You questioned success, identity, morality, time, and even the nature of your own thoughts. You understood that truth is rarely clean or absolute. It is layered, paradoxical, and always unfolding. This made you more compassionate because you realized that every person is doing their best to make sense of a world that rarely explains itself clearly. But it also made you more alone because few share your need to go so deep, and fewer still are willing to dismantle the illusions they depend on for comfort. Yet still you question, not out of cynicism, but out of reverence for truth, because for you, truth is not an answer but a path, a living mystery that reveals itself slowly and only to those who are willing to endure the discomfort of asking without always receiving, of searching without always finding, of trusting the process even when it takes you away from the well-lit roads and into the wilderness of thought, intuition, and unseen knowing where your rare mind feels most at home. There is something inside you that has always whispered that your life holds a unique purpose, something that cannot be easily defined or explained, yet refuses to be ignored. It is not a loud declaration or a grand ambition. It is a quiet, persistent feeling that there is something you are meant to become, uncover, or create. You may not know the exact shape of this purpose, and it may shift forms over time, but the sense of being guided by something internal has never truly left you. Even during times of confusion, stagnation, or loss, you feel this pull beneath the surface, like a thread connecting your soul to something beyond your current understanding. Others may live with more certainty about their roles or goals, content with following a path that is already laid out, but you have always felt that your journey cannot be borrowed or copied. You need to carve it with your own hands, guided not by external rewards, but by inner alignment. This can be both liberating and deeply unsettling, because the world often demands clear plans, visible results, and measurable success, while your inner compass points to something more abstract, something that reveals itself only in fragments and signs. At times you may question yourself, wonder if you are lost or falling behind, especially when others seem so sure of their place and purpose. But the truth is, your path unfolds differently. It moves in spirals, not straight lines. What looks like stagnation is often a period of gestation, where something within you is preparing to emerge, something authentic that cannot be rushed. This inner sense of destiny often manifests as a deep curiosity, a hunger to understand life beyond what is taught or told, an intuitive attraction to certain themes, symbols, or mysteries that feel personal, even if you cannot explain why. It may also appear as a strong sense of being called to do something that feels irrational to others, a need to explore, create, or serve in ways that don't always make practical sense. And though this calling doesn't come with a clear roadmap, it gives you a kind of resilience that others don't always see. You are able to endure long periods of uncertainty because you sense that they are necessary parts of the journey, not signs of failure. This doesn't mean you are immune to doubt or fear. On the contrary, you often wrestle with these more intensely than most. But even in your darkest moments, there's a small, steady light that never goes out. This light is the sense that your existence is not random, that your thoughts, gifts, and struggles are part of something meaningful, even if you haven't yet discovered the full picture. You don't need the whole vision to keep going, you just need the next step to feel true. And when it does, you follow it, not because you're certain, but because to ignore it would be to betray something essential within you that has always known you were meant to walk a different kind of path. You've likely spent much of your life trying to adapt, to blend in, to be what others expected or needed you to be. Yet despite your best efforts, there's always been a subtle sense of misalignment, as if you were playing a part in someone else's script, rather than living your own truth. You've smiled when you felt indifferent, agreed when you wanted to disagree, showed up when your spirit needed rest, all in the name of connection or acceptance. But no matter how skillfully you mirrored the world around you, something inside you refused to fully belong, and this wasn't due to arrogance or self-importance. It was the quiet resistance of a soul unwilling to abandon its own shape just to feel comfortable. There's a dissonance that arises when your inner life doesn't match the roles you're being asked to perform, and over time, that dissonance grows louder until it can no longer be ignored. You may have questioned yourself, thinking something must be wrong with you for not feeling at ease in places where everyone else seems content. But this discomfort isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of authenticity trying to emerge. The truth is, you were never meant to fit into molds designed for others. Your thoughts, values, and emotional depth often stand in contrast to the environments you've been placed in, and rather than bending yourself to fit, your psyche instinctively resists, even when your outer behavior complies. You've likely found moments where you're surrounded by people, participating, smiling, even laughing, but feeling like an observer rather than a participant, disconnected from the shared rhythm that seems so natural for everyone else. This isn't because you're cold or distant. It's because your internal experience is layered, constantly processing, evaluating, seeking something more meaningful than what the surface offers. You might try again and again to engage in the ways others do, hoping that one day it will feel natural. But deep down you know that your connection to the world must be grounded in something real, something sincere, or it won't satisfy you. This inability to fit in is not a weakness, but a mark of inner truth refusing to be compromised. You are drawn to depth, to nuance, to complexity, and environments that lack those qualities leave you emotionally and mentally depleted. You may long for belonging, yet every time you try to force it, it fractures your sense of self just a little more. Eventually, you begin to see that your path is not about fitting in, but about creating spaces where your rare personality can thrive without distortion. You learn to honor your own rhythm, to protect your inner world from the noise, to connect selectively and intentionally, and in doing so, you begin to attract others who, like you, have spent their lives on the outside looking in. You don't fit in because you weren't designed to follow the standard script. You were made to question it, to rewrite it, to show that true belonging is not about conformity, but about being fully seen in your wholeness without needing to shrink or pretend. Your inner world is vast, rich, and textured in ways that even you sometimes struggle to fully understand. Where others see idle thoughts or fleeting fantasies, you experience entire universes unfolding behind your eyes. Ideas don't simply visit you. They arrive like visions, fully formed, intricate, often accompanied by feelings so strong they pull you out of the present and into the dimension of imagination. You don't just daydream to escape. You enter these internal landscapes because they feel as real, if not more real, than what exists around you. You find stories in silence, characters in shadows, possibilities in the smallest of details, and from this deep well of inner imagery comes a creativity that defies structure or formula. It's not something you try to generate. It flows through you, often uninvited, sometimes inconvenient, but always alive. People may think you're distracted or too lost in your head, but they rarely grasp the depth of what's happening inside you. A simple image, sound, or word can trigger a flood of thoughts, metaphors, and intuitive insights that stretch far beyond what language can capture. This imagination isn't always light or whimsical. It can be intense, emotionally charged, even haunting. You've probably envisioned futures that never happened, conversations that were never spoken, entire scenarios that feel emotionally real even if they never materialized in the external world. And because you experience your imagination with such intensity, you may carry emotional responses to things that others can't see or understand. At times, this makes you feel disconnected from reality, not because you reject it, but because your perception includes layers that others don't acknowledge. You interact with symbols, archetypes, and emotional truths that don't need to exist physically to carry meaning. This way of being often inspires a unique creative expression through art, writing, music, design, or problem solving that channels your inner world into tangible form. But even if you never share your creations, your imagination remains a sanctuary, a space where you can explore the truths too complex or subtle to express outwardly. It also becomes a place of reflection where you process your experiences, question what you've been taught, and experiment with alternate perspectives. You don't rely on imagination to hide from life. You use it to understand life more deeply. And while it may set you apart or make others misunderstand you, it is this very inner richness that grants you vision, intuition, and originality. You often arrive at insights that others miss, not because you are trying to be different, but because your mind naturally sees connections that exist beyond the visible. There may be times when you wish you could turn it off, rest in stillness without 1,000 thoughts blooming behind your eyes. But even in those moments, you recognize that this gift, though complex, is the source of your depth, your wisdom, and your ability to touch the invisible dimensions of experience that most never learn to see, much less understand. Time has never felt entirely linear to you, not in the way most people describe it. While others move from moment to moment in a straight and predictable line, you've often found yourself floating between memories, possibilities, emotions, and impressions that do not obey clocks or calendars. A single moment can feel eternal, while days can pass in what feels like an instant. You may look back on your life and see not a neat timeline, but a collection of emotionally significant moments that shaped you in ways far deeper than chronology can explain. Certain experiences remain vivid as if they just happened, while others fade despite their recency. This is not forgetfulness or distraction. It's the way your consciousness processes life, not in steps, but in symbols, in emotional intensity, in meaning. You might be drawn to the past, not out of regret, but because you sense that there are still insights buried in it, still patterns forming, still truths unfolding. At the same time, your mind often stretches forward into the future, imagining, sensing, preparing for what has not yet come, sometimes so intensely that it feels like you've already lived certain moments before they happen. People may tell you to stay present, but what they don't realize is that your version of presence includes much more than the physical now. It includes the emotional echoes of before, the intuitive whispers of what's coming, the layers of reality that exist beneath the immediate. Because of this, you may have a hard time engaging with environments that feel rushed, fragmented, or overly structured by artificial schedules. Your inner sense of timing often conflicts with external demands. You may feel energized and inspired at unconventional hours, find yourself reflective when others expect action, or experience deep calm in situations others find chaotic. You're not resisting the world's pace out of stubbornness. You're following an internal rhythm that arises from somewhere much deeper than habit or routine. Sometimes this altered sense of time can make you feel disconnected from the mainstream, especially when you struggle to explain why you need more space, more silence, more time to process than those around you. But it also allows you to tap into moments in ways that others can't. You notice details others overlook, linger where most would rush, absorb the texture of an experience instead of just its function. You understand that some truths arrive slowly and cannot be forced, that some healing only begins after years of silent accumulation, that some insights need time to ripen in the unconscious before they reveal themselves. This sense of time is not a flaw. It's a gift that allows you to live more deeply, to move with awareness instead of urgency, to sense cycles and seasons in your life that others cannot see. And though it can feel isolating, this relationship with time gives you the ability to live from the inside out, to prioritize what matters over what is immediate, and to allow your rare personality to unfold at its own sacred pace without being bent by the mechanical demands of a world that often forgets the wisdom of slowness, reflection, and depth. To possess such a personality is both a burden and a gift. You will often feel unseen by the majority, yet deeply recognized by a few. You may suffer more, but you will also understand more. Life will never feel simple, but it will always feel profound. And though the world may not always reflect your inner depth, It is exactly people like you who shift culture, heal others, and quietly reshape the future. So if these signs echo within you, do not diminish yourself. You are not too much. You are simply uncommon, rare, and in a world starved for depth, your very existence is a quiet revolution.